Hello and welcome to Press TV Spotlight. I'm Marzieh Hashmi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, Iran has reached another technological milestone as Iran's Islamic Revolution Guard Corps have revealed the indigenous production of a hypersonic missile called Fattah. Well, the commander of the IRGC Aerospace Division, Brigadier General Amir Hajizadeh, says the missile has a range of 1,400 kilometers. Iran is the fourth country in the world to have this advanced missile technology, and this has all been accomplished while Iran is still under very tough sanctions. Stay with us as we take a look at what this all means on this Spotlight. I'd like to welcome my guests to the program. Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector in Iraq out of Bethlehem, New York. Shabir Razvi, political analyst out of London. Thank you both for being with me. Well, let's start it off with Scott in New York. Scott, let's talk about the significance of this feat and how difficult it is for Iran to have reached this stage in being able basically to develop a hypersonic missile.
Well, I mean, it's if everything that the Iranian government Revolutionary Guard is saying is true, because remember, it's unverified at this point by any outside powers, but let's just assume that it's true. It's a very impressive feat. It would be impressive under any circumstance. Take the United States, for example. We're not under any sanctions, and yet we're having difficulty fielding an air-launched hypersonic missile because the technological hurdles are considerable. You're dealing with extreme heat that is generated by the speed, the maneuverability necessary to avoid air defenses, the precision electronics that go into the guidance, the advanced propellants. All of these are hurdles, any one of which is very difficult to overcome. But for Iran to bring all of them together, especially under sanctions, is an extraordinary accomplishment.
Well, let's look at that, Shabir. I mean, there are several unique features that this Fattah hypersonic missile have. I'd like to talk about their importance. I mean, the missile is very mobile and it travels at high velocity. It can also shatter air defenses and it's extremely accurate. I mean, let's talk about the significance of this accomplished. Shabir?
Hello, good evening. Thanks very much for your invitation.
Thanks.
Look, I'm not an expert on military equipment and warfare like our fellow panelist, Scott, is. What I would say, as far as the second part of your question, is the significance of it. Look, at the end of the day, Iran has been, as you quite rightly pointed out in your opening comments, severe sanctions, 43 years. And we have talked on numerous occasions how these sanctions have affected the general public in Iran. However, technologically and in other areas of intellectual property, Iran has made significant strides. As far as this particular supersonic is concerned, I understand, 5 times faster than the sound. And really, it can penetrate all kinds of measures that the countries would apply. I mean, this is, I would say, goodbye Iron Dome. And really, the reality is that the Zionist entity is probably more frightened. And that, I suppose, is the great significance of this particular development and the testing of this equipment. What I think it also tells the world is that Iran is not a country to be played around with. I got a message today from one of my friends on WhatsApp saying that it's rather sad that Iran has wasted so much money on this particular equipment. The problem is that the USA spends more money on military warfare, 10 times more than other 10 nations put together. I think in the current year, it's nearly 900 billion. And if you get 10 other nations together, they don't even spend that much money. So, as far as resources are concerned, wastage, in America, as you well know, 50 million people don't have health care. Why is America not spending money to improve the health care of their people rather than on sort of military hardware?
Okay. Well, you made an interesting point, Shabir, about some would say, why would Iran spend on this? And I want to look at that, Scott, because actually President Ibrahim Raisi said that with this technology, as a matter of fact, Iran brings a message of peace, and it actually is a deterrence to war. Your take on that, because of course Iran is continually criticized for spending money on this type of military technology, but your overall perspective.
Well, I think President Raisi has a very valid point. The fact is, right now, Iran is a nation that is at war with Israel. It's not a declared war, but it's an undeclared war where Israel is carrying out a number of covert actions designed to target Iran's nuclear program, scientists, and sensitive military technologies. And as Iran continues to evade sanctions, as Iran continues to thrive and prosper as a nation, as Iran's clout in the region increases, pressure will be placed on Israel to increase its own destructive measures against Iran. What Iran has just done is put Israel on notice that there are red lines, and if these red lines are crossed, Israel will be struck decisively, violently, and most importantly, in a non-nuclear fashion. A lot of people have said that the pressure being placed on Iran creates an impetus for the need for a nuclear weapon. What Iran just did is prove that it doesn't need a nuclear weapon. With this hypersonic missile, Iran can destroy the Israeli government, destroy the Israeli military, attack American installations in the region. Should America attack Iran, attack American shipping before it gets close to Iran. Iran has basically leveled the playing field from a military perspective, and what that does is causes the other people, Israel, the United States, and others, to back away, and it does create the opportunity for peace. Look, Iran and Saudi Arabia are engaged in unprecedented rapprochement, the betterment of relations. I think what Iran has done by fielding this weapon is create an even greater opportunity for peace and prosperity for everybody in the region, because it makes war more unlikely.
Because it's more costly. It's a deterrence, correct? That's what you're saying, Scott? All right. Well, Shabir, how has Iran been able to improve exponentially? I mean, in major fields of technology, whether we're talking about from nanotechnology to missile technology and in so many other areas, despite these harsh sanctions and pressure that has been put on the country. I mean, what do you think is the key to its success?
Well, one of the factors is self-reliant, because a factor which has in the past had an impact on developing countries is over-reliant on Western technology, whether it's British, French, European, or American. Due to the sanctions, as the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Imam Khamenei, has quite often repeated that sanctions have been a gift to the Islamic Republic of Iran, because what has that provided is that they are not given an opportunity due to the sanctions to get technology from foreign countries. So they have relied on themselves. They have educated the younger population, because what you've got to realize that this is also the 34th anniversary of the demise of Imam Khomeini. And after his death, the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Imam Khamenei, has sort of endured even greater challenges, if you like, in that period to overcome, with the sanctions, with Iran not being able to procure whatever it required from other countries due to the economic and sort of other warfare being sort of applied to Iran. Iran not being able to sort of use international sort of banking transactions. So it has found an opportunity to rely on its own people, rely on its younger generation, and also the academic institutes themselves, which are doing a marvelous job in sort of training the next generation, giving them the motivation, and also the dignity and pride that it's better to develop your own products rather than being dependent on other nations. Because what happens, what creates, if you're dependent on other nations, is that they very easily, stop supplying you spare parts due to any other reasons. Then, whatever equipment, military equipment, technology, anything that you buy from foreign countries, you're not able to use, because at the end of the day, they need spare parts. And not only spare parts, they need knowledge. They need sort of training. Here, these are indigenous, locally produced, reliant on domestic, so everything is available. Spare parts, training, sort of if something goes wrong, they can do the repairs themselves rather than calling foreign technicians to assist them. So at many levels, the sanctions have actually provided an opportunity for Iran to excel at all levels.
Okay, what about that, Scott? Do you think that those who implemented the sanctions actually have failed? And perhaps if they had to do this all over again, they might take a different course, because what Shabir said was true, that Iran was forced into much of this. If they could have bought various parts or technology, I'm sure in many cases they would have, but they were forced. So in the long run, it seems like the enemies of Tehran that was trying to bring it down basically shot themselves in the foot. I mean, how do you see it?
No, that's 100% correct. I think a topic that Shabir brought up is we have to emphasize it's not just the technologies that are being developed by Iran. It's people. It's the humans that are educated. In the West, we oftentimes make the mistake of viewing Iran as a developing nation, as an underdeveloped nation, as a third world nation. But the fact of the matter is, Iran has some of the most highly educated working force there are, men and women. And these are very impressive people who have developed their talents indigenously, within their own capacity because of the sanctioning of the world. There was a time when Iran would send its students abroad to study in Europe, to study in the United States. And while they got the education, they were held hostage to, in a way, intellectually, to Western institution, a Western mode of thinking. And when you combine that with an over-reliance upon Western technology, you find that Iran becomes subservient to the West. Sanctions have liberated Iran. This highly trained, highly educated class is now doing it themselves. The Iranian institutions, the academic institutions, are some of the finest in the world. The people that they're churning out are some of the most highly educated, most highly capable people, and they're being compelled to take these talents and develop an indigenous capability. This was something that anybody with any remote amount of logic and intuition would have foreseen. It's obvious that this is the direction that a talented people will take. They're not going to surrender. The Iranians aren't going to quit. They aren't going to give up. They're going to double down and continue to work. But the prejudice that exists in the minds of Western policymakers doesn't allow for that possibility. And now we're stunned as we see Iran not just surviving, but thriving because of sanctions. Sanctions have backfired in the worst possible way from the Western perspective.
Interesting points that you made, Scott. And Shabir, picking up on a point that Scott said, when he talked about the highly educated populace that we have, the young people, just looking at this and putting it in perspective right now, because of course we know from last year, the 6 months or so, we know that Iran was under so much pressure. And it's very interesting because even right now, Iranian young people, the youth, are continually being targeted and offered either scholarships or visas to go abroad and study. So do you think that's an extension of basically that they have shot themselves in the foot and now trying to backtrack to pull these young people back into their education, their learning institutions, instead of being homegrown and studying, and of course having that perspective that they have to do whatever it can to create a better Iran. How do you see that fitting into all of this?
Well, look, of course, it's very clear that many of the Iranian institutes, whether it's Tehran University or Amir Kabir University and other institutes of that ilk, are producing, enormous number of talent, which has expertise in nanotechnology, in IT, in military technology, and all arenas of sort of, to make the country self-reliant, independent, sovereign state. Added to that is, brain drain is one of the sort of challenges which faces many of the developing countries, because the lure of the greenback sort of allows the educated individuals to leave their countries, and the talent is lost. And who benefits? Europe and America benefits from that. However, the youth in Iran, I think, have a certain degree of pride to develop their own nation. Irrespective of that, they may not be earning that high salaries in Iran, but they're able to live and survive in a manner that is appropriate for a country that they're living in. People don't need to have massive houses in Beverly Hills and drive a Lamborghini and a Porsche to have a good life. If they're developing the community and the nation, it gives them a great pride to do so. And I think that's perhaps one of the factors which is sort of not creating that much of a brain drain from Iran. Obviously, over the years, many people have left because of their own sort of anti-Islamic views and the Islamic Republic, and they've gone and lived wherever they're living at this moment. But I think in the last 5 to 10 years, perhaps the brain drain hasn't been that significant on Iran. That's why they've been able to develop in all areas of any significance.
Well, Scott, when assessing Iran's overall development, I just want your perspective on your overall assessment of Iran's future in the region and globally.
Well, I think one of the mistakes that the West has made is alienating Iran. For better or for worse, the fact is that from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Iran was a Western-leaning nation. It had largely turned its back on the East. Even in the 80s and 90s, in the early 2000s, with all the difficulties that existed between Iran and the West, the reality is, had the West simply extended a helping hand in good faith, Iran would have grasped it because Iran continued to lean towards the West. But these sanctions have compelled Iran to pivot to the East in a way that was unimaginable internally. And now I think Iran is becoming awoken to the fact that there is a whole new world out there that is not only willing to work with Iran, but waiting to work with Iran. That the entire Central Asian area, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, these are places that are looking for development, and Iran is a nation that will participate in this together with China, together with Russia. This is a brave new world for Iran, and I think that their membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, their participation in a Eurasian Economic Union just bodes very well for the future of Iran.
Okay, and Shabir, 30 seconds, final comments.
Well, look, at the end of the day, it's not only sort of supersonic developments on the military front, but I think the supersonic developments that are taking place between Iran and Saudi Arabia are also of significance. And I think, the Gulf countries are realizing that the stronger the Iran becomes, the better security they would have in that part of the world.
And on that note, appreciate both of you for being with me out of Bethlehem, New York. Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector in Iraq, And out of London, political analyst Shabir Rizvi. Thank you both. And thank you, viewers, as always. We appreciate you being with us for another Spotlight. I'm Marzieh Hashemi, signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. See you next time. Goodbye.